Hello again, and welcome to testing and prototyping in RP0. So I've been meaning to do this video for a little bit. Somebody had asked a question in the last day or two, so I figured it may as well be a decent time to do it. So I just opened Alt F12, went to Cheats, I just turned on Infinite Propellant. So I'm going to look at and talk about adjusting the plume for, the real plume of something. Let's try to vaguely center this. So I've just got a random Titan 2 Gemini here as a test thing, and I've lit up the engine, the LR87 booster. So first off, to be able to kind of tweak this in game, just to actually kind of figure out what you want it to, to actually end up looking like, you'll want Blitzy's toolbar. Oh, that opened a. Well, let's see. Sure, let's pull it over. Blitzy's toolbar. I probably grabbed it through CCAN, but anyway. So that's the program you'll want if you don't have this, and then you can kind of configure which buttons will show. I've got smokescreen on, and so that's why I've got the smokescreen button. And so this is a very simple example, just because this only has a single engine. So if you're kind of adjusting for, say, something like the Saturn 1B, Saturn IB, that has 8 engines, it'll be a little trickier. So you'll see an entry for every engine. By the way, I have max particles set to 4,000. I think the default might be 1,000 or something like that. And I find that it gives me a good balance of performance. So it'll show everything, and nicely, this is a relatively recent addition, it'll show, I think, the max number of particles it has produced. And so you can click on one and you'll get a window. If you accidentally click on 2 of them, it's kind of confused because it can only show you one window at a time, so you'll want to turn it off, turn it on. So the plume is the actual fire smoke coming out here, so if I go active, it turns off. And you can see the other part is called the flare, and the flare is, it's that part. Alright, so we're going to be focusing on the plume here. So to adjust what it actually ends up looking like, and clear, that just makes it flash away. So I'm going to open, configure, rebuild. There's a couple different ways to do it. Admin numbers, I just look at the text, so I'd fiddle through here. One way for you just to kind of get a feel for it might be to, you can open this up and it will just simulate different things. So this is what the plume looks like at the ground. So rather than trying to adjust these numbers and fly a rocket and look at things while you're flying, you can go to this manual inputs, and so this would be if it throttled. That would make a difference, but I don't think this engine throttles. So you can kind of simulate it rising and what the plume will, here let's focus on the plume a little more, what it will look like by adjusting atmospheric density. So it kind of is just telling the engine plume that the atmosphere density has changed. And so you can see how the plume evolves as we pretend that the atmosphere is different density. Not sure what that does. So you can just input the number manually. That's cool, just as an individual number, or you can drag the slider and it will report it there. And so that's how the plume will evolve as you rise through the atmosphere. So let's say I didn't like the way it looked at the ground. And there's no sliders for things that aren't used in the plume config. So these are things you could set up: Mach speed, part temperature, external temperature. Right now it's just power value and atmospheric density as it evolves as the atmosphere changes. So we'll go back to it just getting the current real value. So I go import. So I opened this up, open config editor, import, rebuild, just so it shows us this. I'm not sure what happens if you just go import and then edit them here. I'm honestly not sure. But generally I'll go rebuild and then I'll modify things in this view and then go apply. You could try just import, adjusting things, apply, and see what that does. No reason not to. So each engine has a max limit set of 1,000. So you can see here it's telling us a number. And so you could probably change this, get more particles, I'm not sure, or less. But anyway, I'll just mess with the ones that I generally mess with. But feel free to fiddle with anything in here you want. So this is a useful one that I kind of wish was non-zero for most of them. It just adds a bit of randomness to the distribution. So let's say 5 meters per second, apply. So see how it's a little fuzzier now? That's because as each particle is generated, it's kind of popping out just a slightly different direction. And that might actually help with what my example modification of this is. Obviously when it's 0 or very low, you can see the individual balls. And there's different ways to change that. So you could make them expand fast, you could make them more frequent. There are various ways to make those look different. So if I increase this randomness, it looks more fuzzy. And kind of depending on whether you like the look of that or not, that might be all you'd want to do, is just change this value. I don't know if I've ever changed this in a config for an engine, but I'm sure it's possible. This is just in-game, kind of you choosing what look you like. So I won't mess with that because that was 0. All right. And I don't necessarily dislike the ball look, just because it kind of represents, it looks somewhat like mock diamonds to some extent, and I'm okay with that. If you're not sure what mock diamonds are, you should definitely take a look. They're kind of somewhat common in rocket exhaust near the ground. So these, again, may not mean much to you because they're just numbers, but this is what the emission characteristic, how it will change as the power changes. But here we're looking at all density. So as this is a function, these are properties that feed into that function. So let's say density is high. So let's see what this does. So emission, I think it'll change the number of particles. So I just decreased it, and see now we have fewer particles, and so that appears to be the case. So it looks, so when the atmosphere is a thickness of 1, so near the ground, it's normalized. So there we go. So that's how it's set. And then as it's getting higher, that's the effect it's having. It's reducing the number of particles that are being emitted. And they all have the same lifetime, which I believe was what energy is. So power is an exponent function, so this will basically affect this whole function. If I affect power, it'll affect everything. Maybe it's like 1.3 then to the power of these, and that's what's setting, that's kind of the numerical output. So anyway, I won't mess with that. Density, so near the ground, let's see what energy. I believe this changes how long each of these particles lives. So if I zoom out, you see they're all kind of dying here. So I'm increasing the density, and there we go. So they're living longer, and it looks like because there's a limit on how many particles it will show for the engine, it's, because these ones are alive way out here, it's not allowed to generate new ones. So I think that's why it's having that effect. So let's just limit this. So there we go. Hopefully it'll just generate this. All right. So to make it more obvious what happened, if we decrease how long the particles will live, then they're only going to live out to this length. There we go. So that's one way to adjust how far out they go. Basically how long the plume is. Energy affects their lifetime. So another way to affect that would be to adjust the speed. Like how long is this? It's how, the velocity of the particles, which is what we were just affecting. And then speed is how fast they're coming out of the engine. So let's change that to say 0.5. So now they're closer together, therefore again it's not traveling as far. And conversely, let's go back to the 1 to see what it looked like. And there you go. So you can see that they're way further apart, and so they're going further because of that. And then there's some other functions you can definitely mess with. They're much more complicated, but feel free. There's a variety of aesthetics that RealPlumes could have. And there's no wrong answer. If you think it looks cool and other people think if you think it looks cool, do it, save it, keep it, right? Feel free to share it with people. If you think it looks cool and then you find that other people like the aesthetic of plumes you're making, you can package them and share them. That's definitely a thing people can do. We've fiddled with, Felger and I and some other people have fiddled with the aesthetic that the RealPlumes in Realism Overhaul have, and as the underlying mods for how the plumes look change, we kind of have to tweak and resolve problems. So anyway, so that's how to change what they look like if you're curious of the aesthetic side. If you're just interested in fixing a bug, so here you can see here's where the particles are being created. So local position tells you where they're going to be start being created from. So it's 0.2. Now if I set it to 1.2, they're going to start being created back here. If I were to make it a negative number, they're going to accidentally be created in somewhere inside the engine. So in some parts, when something changed with how the hypergolic ones looks, they were being created like inside the tank or inside the part, which was a problem, right? It just looks clearly wrong. And so we had to adjust them, and there are various changes, pull requests in Realism Overhaul correcting that. So anyway, those are all kinds of different things you can change with your RealPlume. And see, I've clearly ruined it. So let's say I figured this was the right value, right? If I wanted to lock in this value, because this is just in test, this is to figure out quick live in game what something should kind of figure out your aesthetic, what the numbers will look like. So I'd recommend, say, just like screen capping these so you don't lose whatever values you've changed. And then you want to look. I'm doing screen capture, not just window capture for once. So you will want to find the plume for the engine. So let me just actually go back. So if you look in your, let's see, realism overhaul. So if you go to your game data realism overhaul, all the plumes for engines in realism overhaul, they're stored in one folder. So RealPlume configs and FASA, because that's the mod. So again, they're just like other realism overhaul things. They're sorted to folders by the mod they're in. FASA, and then I don't remember which engine that was. Was it the 87? I think so, because the Mini is on the second stage. So, and then I would just open it in Notepad++, which I already have. Here you can open it in any text editor, and so this shows you the actual current saved plume for that part. And so if I wanted to change the local position, if I thought it looked wrong, I could do that. Weird. It looks like there's. Oh right. Weird. Okay, I think these are ordered. So this is a kind of an odd engine. Because it burns different things, it is an engine which can burn hypergolics, Carolocks, Hydrolocks. So each of these is a plume matched to each of those. So for the engine I'm currently using, it's using that. So you don't need to worry about much of this. Pretty much no plume will look like as complicated as this one, but I'm going to mess with hypergolic because that's the one I'm messing with right now. So this is where I would want to look. All right. So if I wanted to change the position, I would just change this number and then save it and then be done. And if I wanted to change something about how the plume looked, I could similarly adjust these numbers. So this is kind of a quick high-level way to adjust how a plume looks. If you want to adjust it on a more fine level, you'll have to you do it a bit differently. But let's take a look here. So if I select this part, and I'll show you where this is. Module Manager Config Cache. So let's see. So you can actually see what the whole plume looks like in code, and if you really want to dig into it, Godspeed to you. It's more complicated, but it does let you actually see what the game sees the part as, and say the there we go, config cache. So that's what I have open here. Module Manager Config Cache. So I just selected the part, and then this will be the entire definition of the part. And if I skim, let's try that again. No, that is somewhere in the tech tree. Let's just go somewhere random. So there we go. Okay, so here's the part again. So I'm going to skim down through all this. This is for other, all that kind of function of realism overhaul, but eventually you'll come down to plume. And so this will be, these are the values you'd want to adjust. So to actually kind of make more custom changes to a plume other than just fixing it to the right position or changing the basic scale, you would kind of need to create a module manager type patch for this, it would look like something like that, plume, and then at the name, making sure you're hitting this name, and then modify whichever property you're looking to modify. And then I believe from these kind of main plume characteristics, if you'd adjust, you can set any of these in like this, right? These more or less are pretty much the same. It does this doesn't set every single property, but you can see it sets most of them, and the other ones can be adjusted. And then from this, the game somewhere else, some other module manager patch creates the actual effects cluster, which has those individual values, which you could also create a patch which adjusts those or do other more complicated things, but you see my point. So doing the most basic changes isn't too bad, and you can really mess with this aesthetics in game. And if you find that that's enjoyable, that you can find plume looks that you prefer by doing things like this, then you just need to make module manager patches to apply those to the engine by default, as in when you load up the game again, the plume will have the look that you had. But yeah, so that's just been a quick demo of how to adjust a real plume, how to create a real plume. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.